good people of YouTube, and welcome to my hobby channel. And if you've seen any of my recent videos, you will know that not that long ago tragedy struck the household and I dropped my Marauder giant. I did however say that it was a golden opportunity to do a how to fix broken miniatures video, and that's what I'm going to do here. I could talk about cleaning up the break, I could talk about drilling and pinning a metal model, I could talk about using super glue with activators, I could talk about using Milliput and green stuff in order to fix this model. But I'm not going to talk about any of that because actually I don't need any of these, I don't need these, I won't be doing any pinning, I don't need any putty, I just need some glue. For this project I'll be using super glue on the metal parts of the miniature. I will be using plastic glue to repair the base. Frequently when I get the super glue out in my videos, people jump onto the comments and say, oh, you should have used an activator. And you can use an activator, but as you can probably tell from how the labels on these two tins of super glue activator have started to degrade and discolor, I don't use super glue activator very often myself. That's my own personal choice. If you wish to use an activator, please do. So I may cover it in a future video, but for this video I'm going bare minimum. Hopefully you can see from the pieces of the model that I have in front of me that when the giant was originally sculpted, it was sculpted with a pin and socket as part of the design. And I don't know if this is just a bit of good luck, but I don't have any problems here with the fit not being snug or the arm returning back to its original position. So that makes life a lot easier. I'm not going to over egg the pudding by drilling and pinning and cleaning off the glue or anything like that. I assembled this model over 25 years ago, and until I dropped it everything was fine, so I don't see any point in making this job any harder or more difficult than it already is, and at the moment it looks like an easy repair. So I'm going to keep this surface intact as it is and just add some more super glue. In here there was a little bit of Milliput that was used to help stabilize that as it glued. And you can see that the fit is really snug and really tight. So I'm just going to super glue the hand onto the arm, and then when that's dry I'll super glue the arm onto the body of the giant. So I'm working the super glue so that it's on both parts, and all I'm going to do is just apply some pressure. And there is a little bit of glue around the outside there, so if I were to use an activator now, that glue there would bloom. Instead I'm just going to take the corner of a tissue and allow that to soak up the glue. Now if that dries naturally, it should dry clear, and then I can just come in with some paint and tidy that up. Before I set about attaching the arm to the shoulder, I just want to restore the base. If we look at this old Carnifex here, the same thing happened. I dropped that, broke the fall with my foot, but it did land on the corner of the base, which snapped. Now I have glued that back together. It needs filing down just to make sure the join is invisible, and then that part of the base needs repainting. You can see as well the paint has chipped off the foot. And the base material I was using here to recreate that retro early 90s style is just coloured sand, bright green coloured sand. Now I had two of these painted up nicely, and unfortunately the one on the left got dropped. So that's a restoration project as well. But the reason I'm showing this is because the principle for mending this is the same. I have the good fortune of also having the piece of basing texture that broke away as well, so I can glue that back onto the plastic base once I've repaired it. So I'm just putting some plastic glue on that broken edge there. And then I'm returning the corner of that base there back to its original position. And now I'm going to let that dry before I do anything further. I'm happy now that that's dry. And I'm happy that the base is secure enough for me to super glue that little bit of base texture back in place. So I'm just trying to spread the glue around without getting it everywhere. And hopefully you can see how nicely that's just gone back into place there. Again, I'll let that dry naturally, and then I can come in, smooth down that part of the base with an emery board or nail file like this, just gently working it back, ready to be repainted. I can do the same on this side here. But I'll paint that obviously at the end of this video when the model's dried. I'm now going to put glue on this shoulder socket, leaving everything intact. I also want to get a little bit of glue on the inside of this Milliput and paint that's protruding from the top, so that that hopefully won't peel off in future. And then I just bring the two together like that. Add a bit of pressure. And I don't want to use activator, as I've said before, because that will cause this to bloom, which basically means the super glue seems to crystallize and go white and frosty. So I'm just going to remove what I can with the edge of that tissue. There. Now hopefully that will dry clear, but the whole of that shoulder joint will be touched up with paint once the super glue is dry, but that's holding under its own weight. So I'm happy with that as a repair. I'm now going to leave that model for the rest of the afternoon, come back a bit later, dab a tiny bit of primer in there and repair the damage to the paintwork. Okay, this has had time to dry, and I'm quite pleased with the condition of that repair. There is a gap there which suggests some Milliput was lost in the fall, so I will So I will fill that. And the super glue has dried reasonably clear around the wrist there, and I'll probably just get away with touching that up with just a tiny bit of paint. And then there's a paint chip there and a paint chip there to deal with. So I will start by filling that gap, and I'm going to fill it with Milliput, because green stuff when it dries can be a bit springy and flexible. Milliput dries hard, like concrete basically, and that will help secure the bond. The other benefit of using Milliput, apart from the fact that it's got the characteristics that I'm after, is that green stuff is 3 or 4 times more expensive. So if I'm not creating any detail with the putty, I may as well use the most cost-effective one of the two. And I'm just going to take a tiny bit. I've mixed more than I need, but I can use that on other projects before it dries. And I'm just placing that Milliput there where I need it. I can then come in with a damp sculpting tool. Just gently push the Milliput down into the gap. Work it round there. And now I take a damp clay shaper, just smooth it and blend it. And then, as I've shown you before in previous videos, you can take an old brush that's reasonably soft. Doesn't matter what state the bristles are in. And now I'm just brushing away any little particles that may have generated during the smoothing process, and also brushing off any moisture from the sculpting tool. And I can now leave that to dry. But that is a nice smooth finish. I haven't obliterated too much of the paint job around that repair. So I can now clean my hands, clean this brush, wait for that to dry, and then get the paints out. Also, whilst I've got the Milliput mixed, I'm going to put a tiny bit just down here by the foot, because I lost a little bit of paint texture, and I just want to restore the depth in that detail. There. So now I can wait for that to dry. Now that I'm ready to paint, I'm going to use just a tiny bit of this Vallejo acrylic polyurethane surface primer. I can just cut in, cover the Milliput with that, and then it'll be ready to paint. And I'm just going to use a small detailing brush for this. All I'm doing is coming in and covering up any signs of the repair before I then restore the painted surface to its former glory. And I'm just going to come along here where the crack in the paintwork was, and touch up that little chip at the front. And then I'm coming in under here, just going to touch up that chip there. So that repair has now been primed, and I can paint that when the primer is dry. And then also, while I've got the black primer handy, I'm just going to restore the shadow between those two elements of jewellery on the wrist. Like so. And I'll just cut in there as well. And in there, so it doesn't look so obvious. And then when I'm ready, I can just touch that up with a bit of bronze paint. And finally, get some black primer on the damage to the base, including a little on the cracked plastic as well. And I can touch that up when the primer's dry. Okay, I'm ready to start painting. Now, obviously when I restored the paint job on this a while ago, I basically did a zenithal prime, which I can't repeat now because the area that needs painting is too small, and any attempt to zenithal prime that will end up with me getting paint on lots of other parts of the model that I don't want to have to mess about with. The most challenging thing I've got to do is just replicate the highlight on that black there. And the way I did that was to dry brush some of this Vallejo khaki when I was weathering the model. I'm using quite a small brush for the dry brushing, and I usually unload the brush on a kitchen towel. Now, I've seen some YouTube content providers tell you never use a kitchen towel when you're dry brushing because you pick up tissue fibres, but I've never had that problem. And what I've normally found is when I've seen someone else tell me never to do this on their YouTube channel, it's normally because they're trying to sell you a wet palette, which you don't need either. I just use a piece of glass here like this one. So load up the brush and then transfer some of that paint onto a kitchen towel until you're happy with what's being left behind. And then you can just come in and lightly dry brush the repair. And just try and disguise the black. There you go, didn't take long. And I'm just going to transfer a little onto the front as well, just to try and soften that black. Now I'm happy with that. All I've got is an approximation for the green because I was using a speed paint. Transfer a little onto the palette there, which is just a piece of safety glass from an old bit of furniture that no longer exists. I'm mixing that in with a tiny bit of the khaki just to soften it slightly, and then just to give me a little bit more pigment, I've gone for a tiny bit of orc skin, which I can blend until I get a colour that I'm happy with. And then I'm trying to peer around the camera, which isn't easy. I'm just going to come in now and soften that black line by feathering in a little bit of green that is approximately the right shade. There. Then I'll wait for that to dry, give it a dusting again with the khaki dry brush. To repair the mud texture on the base, I'm coming in with a tiny bit of chocolate brown first of all, and I'm using that just to soften the black. And then when that's dry, I will dry brush some flat earth and then some khaki on there to hide that. I also just want to soften the black shadow there as well. So I'm just offloading a little bit of that chocolate brown around the wrist. Now I'm loading up the brush again with a bit more khaki, so that I can just gently soften the green repair. There. So I'm happy with that. And I'm happy with the black. I can also use it around here. To make the jewellery look a bit dusty and dirty before I come in with a little bit of metallic paint, just to bring some of that out again. And now I'm loading my brush up with some Vallejo flat earth. Again, offloading some of that onto the tissue. Hardly seems worth the effort, but I'm coming in now just to knock that repair right back there. Blend it in with the rest of the base texture. And when that's dry, I will dust it with a dry brush of khaki. Ooh. Little bit of brass there now for the jewellery, more than I needed, but and I can come in and all I'm doing here is just adding a little accent to the edges of the bangles. I didn't want to end up repainting all of this, so I'm just doing enough that I will be happy with it. And I'll probably put a little bit of a sepia glaze on that or something. I was going to use Agrax Earthshade up here, but I actually don't need to because that's worked out just fine. So I'll use a little bit of this rather old pot of Seraphim sepia. And I don't want much, just enough to blend everything together, bring out some of the detail on the bangles there, and just warm everything up slightly. And I'm quite happy with that. I'm not repairing a miniature that's destined for the display cabinet. You know, it's a tabletop miniature, and the 2 or 3 foot rule applies. If it looks good from a few feet away, it's fine. Now we're on the home stretch. Just a quick dry brush of the detail around there. I'm picking up some of the other bits on the base just to spread out the paint so the repair looks less obvious. And finally, I'm using some Mornfang Brown. This is the base range, which means it's quite a nice thick paint. And I'm just restoring the edge of that base there. And it may not be entirely perfect, in that you may still see a little hint of the crack or the split in the side of the base. But as I said, this isn't a cabinet model, but it's good enough for the gaming table, and so I'll just go round the rim of the base, making sure that it all looks good. And now I can let that dry. And there is the finished repair. The corner of the back of the base and the ground, the hand and the wrist reattached, and the shoulder. The only thing I might do is just continue that red motif further down at some later stage. But right now, I'm just happy to have my Marauder giant back in one piece. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please smash that like button. Please hit subscribe for more videos like this. If you'd like to leave a comment, please do. But remember to keep those comments kind and respectful. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Hands are shaking like mad now.